I'm interested to hear more about that last piece there when you talk about, and actually we'll keep using the analogy of like, how high are you flying? What are you viewing this from?
Yep.
When you think about, especially in a market like you're describing, where there's both macro and micro influence on the business, on your customer's business, on just the general, value of a dollar, to be really sort of existential in that sense. Even just today, there was an announcement about, a softening of the rate hikes and how we think about that increase. And, every one of these little tiny pivots could be something that I'm sure you in your mind sit there and say, oh my gosh, I got to think differently about X or Y or Z. How do I have to pivot? I have to change. Or you could be sitting there saying, well, I am at 25 or 30,000 feet. I do see that the economy has been through a retraction and or recession before. We've seen these things in history.
Yeah.
So do you become a student of the past?
Absolutely.
Or do you take what you've seen? Yeah. Actually, let's talk about that. So are you a student of the past? Let's talk about that.
So I think what it does at 30,000 foot, I mean, if you're flying along, you can also look in your rearview mirrors and say like, all right, so how did we do with this a couple of years ago? Right. And I think it's the larger you get, the more you need to pay attention to your roots. And one of the terminology that I have been using the last few months and what I'm currently using in this kind of 2.0 visioning is cornerstones. So if you understand what a cornerstone is from a building standpoint, you set those stones in order, and everything else you put on top of that defines your foundation, that defines all the, everything that goes up from that point. And so if you know the cornerstones, or you want to restructure those cornerstones to hit your next phase of growth, like you can learn from the past of what has served you well, and maybe what you want to drop, and use those cornerstones and build on top of that. That's a really good starting point. And ironically, those are down on the ground, whereas you're flying at 30,000 feet, right? But knowing that what serves you well in the past would absolutely help define your future, right? I mean, I think learning from your mistakes, understanding where you have made strong gains and maybe lost gains or whatever the case is an important element for sure.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. So to wrap it up, I'll ask one more question. What's one lesson that you've learned in leading this business for over a decade that you would, if you could rewind back to that first, call it 2 weeks, you sat down at your computer or your whiteboard or whatever, and you were thinking about this thing and starting to conceptualize what you were going to do in terms of starting the business. What's one bit of advice that you would give your earlier self, or the person who's maybe listening right now, who's thinking, I want to go and jump into this ecosystem game. I want to go and build an agency, or I want to go to market and, work alongside another business. What's that little bit of advice you could give that person today?
I heard somebody else answer this question, or at least talk about this question in a totally different context. And I have a ton of respect for him. And I think he answered it in a similar way, but it's actually my same answer from before I heard him say it. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. It's going to be way harder than you think. It's going to be way harder than you can even estimate beyond right now, but it's totally worth it. That's it. Right? It is not going to be easy. And it's so funny this time of year. At one point, this business went through an inflection point, and it ended up dissolving a partnership and a number of other things. It was a very volatile period of time. We were doing big web projects. I'll just give you the quick story. We were doing big web projects at the time. It was 2015, 2016 in there. And we had 3 bids out. And I think they were $50, $60, and $80,000 websites, which were at the time really big projects, right? They still are. But at the time they were we're golden. All we need is for one of those things to hit, and we're going to be great. And 2 of them came back and no, and the third one came back and no. The afternoon before our Christmas party that night, and I went home. I was literally in tears. Because we were financially not going to bridge a gap into Q1, and there was going to take some investment money that we had to put back into, and all kinds of stuff. It's those moments you're I don't understand how this can be this hard, right? But it is. And then once you start to get through some of those things, you're like, oh, okay, this next challenge doesn't seem nearly as difficult. You lose a big client, and you're like, okay, well, there's other clients. The world is full of clients, right? It's a big world out there. And I think once you break through some of those things, you start to realize, like, I can do this. It's hard. It's way harder than I estimated going into it, but it's totally worth it when you get to the point that you're very happy with what you've been building so far, you know?
I love that. It's a great way to end our conversation. You know, when I listen to that story, what I hear is, don't avoid the work, do the hard things, but never forget that this too shall pass. Like, you're having a good day, don't worry, it's going to get screwed up tomorrow. And you're having a really bad day, don't worry, tomorrow could be that much better. And I think there's something really valuable about, you know, writing that on your whiteboard or putting that in your wall, but remembering that, like, the work is the way through and you should embrace it and do the hard things, right? Because certainly, to your point, it'll make you better for tomorrow. But ultimately, that's what the journey is all about, is growth. And the scale that you're talking about here now, you know, over a decade later, is obviously a testament to you committing to that hard work. So cheers to you, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, very cool. Well, look, it's been an awesome conversation, John. I'm glad we connected today. If folks want to connect with you, where do they find you? Do they tweet at you? I don't know if Twitter's still a thing at this point, but you know, where do they find you on the internet? How do they connect?
Mine's easy. So it's John, J-O-H-N at Evenbound. And then I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm fairly active, trying to be better about LinkedIn, but I certainly am active in the viewership on LinkedIn. So, and just a side note on Twitter, my 9-year-old came home and said he's got his whole like strategy behind Christmas presents is asking grandparents for like Amazon gift cards. So he's got like a slush fund built up over the last couple of years in Amazon, and he had like $80 left in there. And he said, "Dad," I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "I need to use $53 of my Amazon money, but I can't buy what I want to buy on Amazon." I'm like, "Well, what is it?" And he goes, "Well, I looked up the value," and this was like right at the time that Elon Musk had bought Twitter. And he goes, "I want to buy 1 share of Twitter stock."
I love it. That's a good forward-thinking kid right there. He's thinking from a business perspective.
Yeah, that is him.
It's brilliant. What a great way to end it here. So be an entrepreneur, do the hard things, and remember this thing, too shall pass. So John, again, great conversation today. I appreciate it. Look forward to our next chat.
Thanks. Me too.